Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar podcast. To review what's known on this podcast as the Burrito 500 at Gateway or Worldwide Technology Raceway, whatever on earth it's called. St. Louis, Madison, whatever town it's in. IndyCar was there for some prime time racing. Very late into the night under the lights at Gateway, which is always very, very cool. It's always something that we're pushing for as fans to see IndyCar under the lights. That did mean we did have a bit of a late one though. Being in the UK, the race started at 1:22 a.m. local time. What time did you go to bed, Archie?
Kyle Kirkwood came into press about 5 o'clock. That was probably done by 5:30. We're probably in bed at 6. I don't think the adrenaline wore off until past 7 o'clock, and that was when I slept. And even when I kind of went upstairs to go to bed at like 5:30, 6, the sun was already beaming through my window, and it was not conducive to good sleep. But I'm not even that tired now as we record at kind of not even a day on. We're not even close to a day on, probably 18 hours on, aren't we? But somehow that adrenaline that kept me awake is still going somehow.
Yeah, I was responsible, listeners and viewers. I went to bed at 5 a.m, so I was much more reasonable with my time management. So I thought I wouldn't listen to Kyle Kirkwood because I had to get up at 8 o'clock. So it's been a long day for me, but I do like night races, but at the expense of my sleep schedule, I don't know if it's worth it long term. Very inconsiderate of IndyCar towards us, I think. Needs to be more considerate of the 18 Brits that are watching the series.
Realistically, this was kind of a race, I feel, that was just... To anyone who says that like ovals are boring or ovals are just turning left, it's one of those where you just like politely screw you. Like, I feel like it was a bit of a joy, this one, from start to finish, and no complaint. I maybe was complaining at 7:30 when I still couldn't get to sleep, but not complaining about the 4 o'clock finish. I actually, to be fair, I find these some of the most fun races to watch because they're kind of more memorable if it's, going deep into the night. I just find them, I just find it quite cool, even if you do maybe pay the price with a messed up sleep schedule. But
the thing about a short oval is you just always have action going on. There's always something to look at. You go into road courses where there's an 18-lap lull, there's no cars overtaking each other, and the TV broadcast is struggling to find something. Ovals just can't take your eyes off anything. There's always an overtake going on. There's always somebody in the wars. It's always near contact, near spins. It's always great to watch short oval racing.
Yeah, and this was IndyCar's first primetime Sunday slot, and it delivered. It was a proper showcase, I thought, and yeah, by far the best race of the season so far. I think the action was kind of just pretty unrelenting from start to finish. It was, you had that frenzy of passing. 2 lanes were working for most of the race, really. We had obviously big incidents, strategies, 14 different leaders, and actual sort of lengthy battles for the lead as well. I feel like it just kind of had everything. And I feel like this season, with all the hybrid chatter or whatever, it's kind of been... Negativity feels like it's become popularized almost. And I think last night was just a really refreshing reminder of just how special IndyCar can be. And it's funny that we've had 2 really good races at Gateway, because it had been kind of the oval that had produced the not so great races, sort of more processional races. But the 2 hybrid visits to Gateway, it seems to have been just this kind of frenzy, really. I don't know whether correlation really equates to causation there. I also think having it at night, the drivers have commented about this as well, that they want every oval race to be under the lights, apart from obviously the 500 because tradition, whatever. I don't think Milwaukee has lights, but it's cooler and it's just conducive to better racing. And we really saw that, and just so many storylines, and I think we saw just the amount of jeopardy you can have as well. And it was unpredictable to the end, really. You had kind of those peaks and troughs that you often get on short ovals. 9 teams inside the top 10, none of them Penske, which I guess the comment I'm going to make here, I guess it shows the competitiveness of the series, but then I'm going to go on to say that it makes it astonishing that Kyle Kirkwood was the winner. We've come away with a repeat winner again, still only 2 winners in 8 races. Kirkwood's 3rd of the season, the most that he's ever had in an individual season, back to back for him. And it's just been such a bizarre season. We're about to cross the midpoint when we're done in Road America next weekend. So, yeah, bonkers. But IndyCar Under the Lights, box office, and Kyle Kirkwood really did it in spectacular fashion to quash that street course merchant notion.
So Kyle Kirkwood's breakout year has continued at Worldwide Technology Raceway. His third win of the season, his fifth of his career, and his first victory not on a street course. He obviously claimed pole last year at Nashville and was very competitive, but his first overall podium, I believe, and obviously leading to his first overall victory in another supplying performance. And as I said, what has been a bit of a breakout year for Kyle Kirkwood, we saw the glimpses of victory in 2023. We saw obviously quite consistent year, but no wins last year, and this year's been where Kirkwood sort of combined those two sides within the team last couple of years and to become one of the most formidable drivers in the series. And Kirkwood's race was a little bit strange because I feel like we didn't really see him until midpoint. There's a lot of drivers who we can mention here that were just, maybe bar Pato Award, everybody just seemed to be spawning in out of nowhere. You'd be like, oh my goodness, how have they ended up in sixth? Oh, how are they in fourth all of a sudden? What's happened there? And we'll get into people like Scott Dixon later and Christian Rasmussen and Venus VK who've just come out of absolutely nowhere to claim an absolutely fantastic result. And Kirkwood qualified 10th. He obviously gained quite a few places at the start and was sort of on top 6, top 7 sort of range. And everyone around him seemed to have an issue, or whether it was their fault or not their fault, and then he sort of picked the way through the order due to that, and as we said, was victorious for the third time this season. Still remains third in the standings. His Indy 500 disqualification is the wrong term, penalisation, relegation, obviously really hampered his chances. He'd be about 50 points off the lead now if it wasn't for that incident there. But goes back to back victories for the first time in his career. And as you said, I can't believe we're almost at the midpoint of the season. We've only had 2 winners. There's a very similar story in Indy Next, where only Dennis Hauger and Lockie Hughes have actually won any races so far this year. So IndyCar in its support series has only had 4 winners and 14 races, which is quite staggering. Eventually it's going to change. Chevrolet haven't won a single race this year. This looked like, for all the world, it'd be the race that would finally change that. With how well Penske were and Pato Award in the mix. We saw Connor Daly competing for victory at points throughout the race. David Malukas as well. And yeah, just didn't quite happen. And this must be the longest Chevrolet probably gone to start a season without a victory, I'd imagine. We need someone to verify that. But yeah, Honda's rich vein of form continues, whether it's super speedway, short oval, road course, street course. And we had to a couple of road courses in the next couple of weeks in Road America and Mid-Ohio. But we'll do a bit more on Kirkwood. It was a bit of a strange one because he didn't really seem like he'd be much of a factor for victory. And then was his penultimate stop, which was the absolute money stop. It vaulted him up another 2 positions, and that sort of left it between him and Award. And then we had Dixon come into the mix due to a very conveniently timed caution. And then I think really strategy was perfect for Kyle Kirkwood. All the pit stops made at the right time, and he was just jumping cars in the pits at the crucial moments. And overtaking wasn't easy outside of starts and restarts. It wasn't very difficult either. But yeah, I think Kyle Kirkwood's pit crew deserve a lot of credit, as well as he does, for claiming the victory.
Just on the Honda point, that's now 9 successive races that Honda have won, dating back to Nashville last year. Obviously 8 from 8 so far this season. That's the same as Penske, because Penske took the last Chevrolet win in the second race in Milwaukee last year. So they are also on a 9-race winless run. And obviously, as you say, it looked for all the world like one of their drivers would take this win. And Chevy locked out, I think, the top 5 in qualifying. So Kirkwood really nicked it from them, it felt like. But yeah, I feel like he had a really good start. I think that was the important kind of initial point to his race. I think he made it up to 5th within a few laps, really, having started in 10th. So that was important. He was kind of just there in and around the top 5 all day, and in the ballpark, I guess you could say. And yeah, I mean, it was that execution in the pits, really. I think he jumped up to a net second after the penultimate stop, and then it was after the final stop that he ultimately took the lead or took the net lead and didn't look back. He only actually led 8 laps, and it was only with 5 laps to go, he actually took the lead of the race because of Rosenqvist and Eilert trying some audacious fuel save that looked for a moment like they actually might pull it off and have just a win from nowhere. But no, both of them had to bail. But yeah, it's a continuation of what's really been an incredible year for Kirkwood. I think now you can certainly say he is a complete driver. I feel like that street course merchant label had a bit of a harsh undertone, really. I think there were kind of connotations there that, okay, this guy sucks everywhere else, which just wasn't the truth. I mean, look at his Indy 500 runs in recent years. Nashville pole last year felt like a bit of a breakthrough, actually.
In fairness, this is actually his first podium. Not only his first win, it's his first podium on a non-street course. So that's pretty surprising.
Yeah, I remember him bringing up in the press conference before Long Beach earlier this year the whole, I know people see him as a street course merchant, and it didn't help that he then went and won the next 2 street course races, obviously winning Long Beach and winning Detroit. But yeah, he just kind of, I don't know, it feels like a continuation of what's been a real coming of age season for Kirkwood. I mean, you look at the championship, so Palou finished 8th. He had an up and down day, Palou. Pretty anonymous, really, but he got caught in a few bits of strife, and then ultimately, came back to 8th, which wasn't too bad, actually. I think he was pretty pleased with that. But Kirkwood's 75 points behind. I think the better that he does, the more that Indy 500 penalty will sting. It was only a 24-point loss, but rather than being 75 points back and still looking like, okay, I'm pretty much 2 races behind Palou, he would have been 51 points behind Palou, which is obviously within kind of a maximum points weekend. But after Detroit, Kirkwood, I mean, he was still triple figures back, and he felt it just wasn't feasible. He wasn't going to run for the championship. But now I don't think you can say he's completely out of the pick, nor out of the picture, nor kind of Pato O'Ward in second, who's only 2 points ahead of Kirkwood. But I have confidence, and maybe a year or definitely 2 years ago in that first year with Andretti, I felt he wasn't a driver you look at and think, yeah, he can win a title. If the opportunity arises, I have full confidence that Kyle Kirkwood could win the championship. And I just love how he conducts himself. He works clearly very hard. Rob Edwards said he's always the first person at the track, and I feel like we're seeing real validation for his junior career, which was incredible, one of the best we've seen in that road to Indy. He spoke very nicely in the press conference about the fact that since he joined Andretti and he's been fighting near the front, he's learned so much from being around the other kind of big guns, the other front running drivers, and said that actually losses to them have been really big for him because he's learned a lot of lessons. So he's now definitely shown the versatility that you need to thrive in IndyCar on such a diverse range of tracks. And yeah, so much expectation when Kirkwood came into IndyCar, but he's really showing that now. And I think, as I say, this year has been validation of how good I think people thought Kyle Kirkwood could be. And I think that's really exciting.
So I think the next thing we'll talk about is Team Penske, because I think the main storyline in the race was how their race pretty much fell apart on all 3 different cars. The first car to fall out was Will Power, who took his first pole since Iowa 23, so the greatest qualifier in IndyCar history. Had not been on a particularly good streak, but had ended that with another pole. And Penske has always looked very, very quick in qualifying. I think they've qualified and pole in the last 4 Gateway races in a row. It might be longer than that. So they've got a ridiculous qualifying record at Gateway. I think it's the last 4 in a row. This has really been their track. Newgarden's got 4 victories. Power's got 1, I believe. McLaughlin's been very competitive here previously. I think he finished 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th up until this point. So had a great record. And Power was running 2nd, sort of in the early. I mean, Maluka's got him pretty much straight off the bat. Ironically, we had 14 lap leaders, and one of them wasn't the pole sitter. So that's a statistic. And then was going into turn sort of midway between turn 3 and turn 4, and his front right sort of seemed to dilapidate as some sort of puncture, and it sort of put him into the wall. He tried to bring it back round because the car seems in decent condition. It was crabbing quite a little bit, but
it was quite funny that actually he did a really good job to get it back, because especially when it was coming down pit lane, it was so sideways. It was quite amusing. So fair play. That was good car control.
Not that it meant anything though, because they pulled him in, and he ultimately had to retire, which is a bit of a shame because every race we still talk about Power's future, and that's naturally going to be the case until the contract is decided. And At that point, when David Malukas was leading, you thought, "Oh no, is this the turning point for the Penske saga?" I don't think it will end up being the turning point that people would like to think it is. But that was a bit of a shame for Power because he seemed like the lead Penske and didn't really have much of a chance to show it, which is a bit frustrating. Although he is still the lead Penske in points, so it's not all doom and gloom. So that was Power. That was just really unfortunate. Obviously, there's nothing really he could do about it. He just thought there was so much strain on the outside front into turn 3 and 4 because you were going flat. That was just a consequence of the loads that tyre was under.
Yeah, and just before we move on from Power, I mean, credit to his qualifying. Obviously, almost 2 years since he's got a pole position. He was the only driver to have 2 laps in the 180 mile per hour range, actually. And obviously, I think Malukas was up there at that point. So it was, a bit of a face-off all weekend, it felt like, between those two. Obviously, they came together last year when Malukas was with Shank. But yeah, Power said that he still feels like he's better than ever and he's quicker than ever. And he did say, which is it kind of feels like a new update, that he basically thinks that his contract won't be decided until after the season, which I think is quite unhelpful uncertainty, really. I don't know, really. It's hard to say because obviously he's going to want to look elsewhere, but maybe if they're saying, okay, it's not going to be decided postseason. Obviously, I guess the leadership changes at Penske haven't helped this situation because now basically everything's on Roger Penske and he's got a lot to manage. But I wonder maybe if Power is replaced by Malukas at Penske, then it would just be a swap and he'd go down to Foyt, and maybe that's why there's not so much panic about needing to get it sorted before so we can explore other options, because in this early stage it really doesn't seem like there's that many seats free. So maybe the Foyt seat that Malukas would leave behind would be the best option if Power was not to be renewed at Penske. But yeah, that's just an interesting update. But he's clearly still quick, Power. He's not lost it, and the fact he is the lead Penske, even with them, so far behind, that is telling. So yeah, just an interesting update there.
Then Joseph Newgarden, sort of after Power had his incident, would eventually take the lead of the race, and as he always does in Gateway, we're extending his lead, and we thought it'd be, the comeback of Joseph Newgarden. We've said several times in this podcast about how difficult the start to the season it's been for Newgarden. Obviously, his only finish in top 8 was in St. Petersburg at the season opener, and then ends up in a really frightening accident with Louis Foster. Foster obviously spinning on the exit of turn 4. Newgarden tries to pelt it to try and go for the gap that there was between Foster and the pit wall, and obviously sort of just ended up sandwiched and had quite a terrifying flip. I think it's obviously fortunate that he didn't go over the pit wall because that's something which was a real possibility. There was a monster accident, a very frightening accident. So obviously, first and foremost, it's great to see both Joseph Newgarden and Louis Foster are okay. Another big crash of Foster in successive races. But yeah, I mean, a very, very scary accident for Newgarden. He was upside down. I mean, we were on board with him in the international feed as he was going upside down, which was quite terrifying. Just obviously credit to IndyCar once again because all the safety mechanisms and procedures are working as they are. The AMR safety team were extremely quick to get onto the scene, and check Newgarden was all right, which is fantastic. But yeah, Newgarden obviously had a sensational record at Gateway prior to this, and obviously just a bit of a shame. Once again, he just really cannot catch a break this season, and every time you feel like, Indy 500 felt like, okay, this could be a turning point. In this race, again, you felt like it might be a turning point. Just something, Long Beach here to some extent, you felt like could be a decent result. Just something usually outside of his own fortune takes it away from him. And yeah, 16th in the standings, and we are at the midway point of the year.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a shocker. And I mean, he had a pretty poor start to the race. I think he dropped down to like 8th on lap 1. He didn't quite have the speed of his teammates in qualifying, but then kind of in his own Newgarden way was very just methodical, patient. I love watching him on short ovals. I think there was one I've got written in my notes occasion where basically he used the lap car of Stingray Robb to pass both O'Ward and Daly essentially in the same lap, which I just thought was so impressive. The way that he kind of manipulates his momentum and uses the traffic's really, really good. And it did look like he was on the way to, what would be a really important win, because it has obviously been just a disaster of a season for Newgarden. But yeah, the crash is, I mean, it's as big an accident as you'll see on a short oval, really. I mean, I feel like in a 2-race stretch, we've had 2 of the biggest non-Indy 500 crashes that we've had in quite a while. And obviously Foster involved in both of them after his suspension failure in Detroit. And yeah, this one was just, he said he'd basically run the high line a bit too long and was up high in 4. And he tried so hard to keep the car under control, but there was no chance he was doing it. The right rear was pretty destroyed. And yeah, I think there's no sight worse than having a car that's just sliding across a straight. And I think that's why I'm kind of feel like the yellow should have come out sooner, because there was enough time for it to slide all the way across the straight, almost get saved, not get saved. I just feel like it should have been sooner. But yeah, it was a pretty horrible shot for it to cut to, really, as Foster's sliding across the track and Newgarden's just got nowhere to go. I mean, there's no yellow out. He's come around the corner. He's not going to see that. Like, it's impossible. There's no time to react. And yeah, there are always the scariest incidents where, I mean, Newgarden's essentially T-boned him. I mean, I think the fact the hit was a bit more rearwards probably was a bit of a godsend, really. But it happened, the impact really, just as Foster had hit the inside safer barrier as well. So yeah, big impact for both of them, obviously, as they collide together. And then again with Newgarden, as he kind of slams the ground briefly. I mean, he was so fortunate not to land at least on top of the pit wall safer barrier. So yeah, I mean, it was quite impressive, really, how intact both cars were, really. I know Foster's car looks a bit mangled, but the safety cell and everything was still perfectly intact. And as you say, the safety crew got there so quickly. I mean, it was within 3 or 4 seconds of Newgarden coming to a halt upside down. But yeah, pretty terrifying seeing that helmet facing camera with the sparks again, a bit like we saw obviously with Hertz at the 500 very recently. And I know the DW12 gets criticized, it's outdated, I get that, but we should also take time in these moments to hail just the integrity and the safety of these cars. I mean, it's so impressive, but no, ultimately it's, Newgarden was having a short oval day like we see from him, but the ending just embodies his season, Penske's season, and pretty remarkable how nothing is going his way, whether that's, his car going bust at Indy or anything else beyond. It's been bonkers, really.
And then the team today was compounded by Scott McLaughlin, who was running third for a lot of the race, cycled up to first a bit later on. But I mean, once he retired, he didn't really seem like a factor anyway. He was sort of running 5th, 6th. He had a mechanical failure. Do we know what it was yet? I'm not sure we do.
No. So, I mean, it was something on the right rear, and he said that essentially he thought someone or something had hit him because he heard like a clunk. So, don't know what's happened, but it's purely misfortune. There's 3 Penske cars that are, out of the race through no fault of their own. This isn't like, I know there's been talk this season about, they've not been executing as they usually does, and that's right. But at the same time, I've never known a top team have just so much consistent misfortune. So yeah, I don't know what the failure was, but I mean, his race kind of got screwed by an unsafe release penalty that dropped him 3 places, and he just couldn't make I don't know how much it screwed him, or whether, to be honest, yeah, he just lost the pace kind of midway through the race. I mean, it's been a catastrophic season. I mean, it's been just a catastrophic season. And yeah, I mean, Power 7th in points, McLaughlin 8th, Newgarden, as you say, 16th. Obviously, I mean, you can wave goodbye to any aspirations of a championship for any of their drivers here before the midway point in the season, which feels inexplicable to say, but I mean, it's kind of irrelevant. But the margins to Palou for their drivers, Power 154, McLaughlin 164, and Newgarden 203 after 8 races. And as I say, they're winless for 9 now, which is the
three podiums this year between 3 cars and 8 races.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. They're winless since winless in 9. They had a similar run at the start of 2021, but I think they finished second 4 or 5 times in that run. These 3 podiums in this run have all been 3rd places. So yeah, it's been a poor season. And we caught up with Scott McLaughlin earlier on race week just to ask about a few different topics, actually, including his rebound from Indy and what exactly has been, going a bit awry for the team this season. Cheers, Dave. Hi, Scott. Belated happy birthday, first of all. But just to
Thank you.
kind of follow up on the indie stuff, you know, you obviously say it's one of the lowest moments of your career, and it was just good to get back out there. What has the process been since then for you, just to put that to the back of your mind, and maybe in the immediate aftermath of it, just to put it to the back of your mind?
Uh, like I said, I think I'm still sort of figuring out like what happened. I've got half an idea of what happened, but for me, I've had plenty of low moments in my career, and I felt like I've come back pretty strong. And that as long as I try and turn this negative into a positive, that's the main thing. I can't just dwell on that moment, but I've got to, it was at the time, obviously I was really sad and was just very emotional about the whole thing. But now you look back at it and there's something in there, like I said, that I'll learn from and make me better in the future or whatnot. And that's how you look at it. You can't look at it any other way. If you keep dwelling on it and whatnot, or, worrying about if that ever happens again, like you just can't. You just got to just eyes forward. And like I said, sun always rises. There's a lot of people with worse dramas than I do right now. And it's just, I feel like I'm in a really good spot, very happy, and just going to keep rolling.
And then kind of following up on what you were saying about your season to date as well, you obviously see yourself, 150 odd points behind Pelot. What does that kind of do to your mindset? Do you, at this point, still believe, I can win the championship?
Yeah, I just look, for me, my biggest goal right now is just to capitalize on some of the pace that we've had. I felt like we were really quick at Detroit. We're in a really good spot there before the incident. And then, obviously Indy, I felt quick all month. Had my best result at the Indy GP for, God knows how long. So it's, we've had some positive momentum, but it's just putting things together, putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And sometimes, I've been in this sport long enough that not just IndyCar, but in supercars as well. Sometimes you can have a fast car and you just don't put it together, and it's not your year. I don't believe it's not my year yet. I certainly need to get on the train and start winning races, or, getting some consistency back, or at least trying to slow down Alex a little bit. But like I said before, that guy is executing at a really high level, and you've just got to try and raise yourself to that level. Not only you, but your team and everyone. And you can't look at it as like, we're terrible or anything. I personally think we've been really, really strong. Just the pieces haven't fallen right now. So I've just got to keep going.
And we're obviously a few weeks on now from some of the personnel changes at the team. Just how have things been since then? Obviously, having lost some key people, and what has that kind of transition or adaptation phase been like since then?
Yeah, no, it's been obviously there's a lot for the team to take in, and we're still working through things as we speak. But ultimately, I think the best thing about Penske is the depth that we have throughout the whole factory, and I'm really sort of excited to just get on with it, excited for the future of the team. I'm here for a long time, so I've got an avid interest for this to work and to be as strong as we were before, which I certainly believe we can with the people that we got. So, really, sort of, it was sad, obviously, like I said earlier, about what happened, but I respect the decision, and you just got to press on and work with the people that you've got, and we'll be okay.
Thanks, Scott. Best of luck this weekend. Cheers, Dave.
I guess we'll sort of go through the running order from this point forwards, because, everyone sort of had such a story to tell in this race. I think we could really be going for ages, because there's so many different drivers who were up and down the order, as I said right at the start. Pato O'Rourke was one who sort of stayed where he was most of the day. He qualified third, dropped to as fourth, fifth, sort of quite early on, and then the Penske's had their issues, so O'Rourke was just naturally in the mix for the entire race. Was jumped by Kirkwood in the final round of stops, which ultimately cost him victory. But there's nothing really much more O'Rourke could have done. He seemed to sort of maximise what he could have done. He only ended up half a second off Kirkwood in the lead. The end, he had a great battle of Connor Daly midway through, which was quite fun. Interestingly, O'Rourke seemed, not critical is the wrong word, but I don't think he was overly pleased with Nolan Siegel on the final restart. I think he sort of believed that Siegel was napping a little bit on the restart, let Kirkwood go, but held him up a little bit, which I think it allowed Kirkwood to get around somebody and cost O'Rourke quite a little bit of time. And whether that was the difference or not between him winning, it could have been. So I think O'Rourke was a little bit frustrated about that, obviously being in another car and team. But overall, again, it's actually O'Rourke's fourth podium of the year, and he sort of lies second in the standings, despite it feeling like he hasn't had a headline season compared to other award years. It feels like this is one of his quieter years, actually, and he's technically Alex Pillow's closest championship contender, which, I mean, he goes to a couple of tracks as well, actually. You know, Mid-Ohio won out last year at Iowa. He'll be good at. We know he's a strong oval driver, so a championship push again, I think. I mean, I know we're trying to push up a championship, but you still feel anyone to win a championship still feels like a long shot at best against Pillow, particularly when he goes to several tracks that he's been astounding at in the past. This is probably his worst track on the schedule, maybe apart from the very limited sample we have at Nashville Super Speedway. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think a championship push is still realistic, but it's another good result for Award. And I think we were having those discussions early on in the year. Okay, is Lundgaard actually top dog on McLaren here? And I think the last 3 or 4 races, Awards quickly said, no, I'm still the main guy in this team, and I'm still the main performer and the one people can rely on. And Lundgaard had a pretty anonymous weekend all round to get penalised, which we'll go into a little bit later. But yeah, Award sort of continued to prove he's a top power McLaren, and I thought he was a bit unlucky. You probably could say he maybe should have won that race over Kirkwood based on the laps prior, but you know, it's the way these things sometimes happen. You win some, you lose some.
Yeah, I feel like Lundgaard, he still has a lot to prove on ovals, and I think we kind of said this coming into the season, obviously, with RLL having been, you know, so poor as they have been. But since that stretch of 3 successive podiums for Lundgaard, I feel like he's dropped off a little bit, and O'Ward's kind of just reasserted his authority in that team. And I just don't feel like at any point this season O'Ward's felt like the quickest guy in any race. That his Aaron McLaren team haven't really felt like being that close to being the quickest team, but he's still picking up these results, which I guess is pretty encouraging. And to be fair, this weekend, I mean, he was the only driver to infiltrate that kind of Penske bundle at the top in qualifying, if you include Malukas in that technical allied Foyt car. Yeah, not much to note on O'Ward, really. I think the whole Nolan Siegel sleeping thing, I think that's just inexperience on Siegel's part. I think it's worth just touching on as well. Siegel's come in for a bit of criticism. There was a report from Nathan Brown via a spokesperson for Aaron McLaren that said Siegel is indeed staying for 26 and their lineup will be unchanged, which there's been criticism. I don't really know why, to be honest, because they get criticised when they chop and change drivers and they get criticised when they, keep stability, so can't win. But, NXT was his plan last year, Siegel. He wasn't really ready for IndyCar when he made that step up. It was very sudden. And this season is really, truly his first season. He's 21 years old. I think he's only run, 20 IndyCar races, really. And I think the team just needs continuity, and Siegel deserves time like every young driver should be afforded. And not every young driver has that same kind of rapid rate of ascension, really, that you get from, say, an O'Ward, for instance. And I feel like Siegel's shown enough glimmers of progress early this year to warrant still being hope that after next year, he could have a future with the team. But I think it's right that he gets a second season.
I think Siegel's always going to be criticised because of the way he came into that seat. I think you're instantly, because of the way he came in, you're always going to have your comparisons to how Pourchaire did, and Siegel didn't impress as quickly as Pourchaire did. And I always feel that's I'm not saying it's deserved, but that's why he's going to get criticism, because ultimately people didn't think it was the right call to take out Pourchaire, and he hasn't proved that replacing Pourchaire was still the correct call. Yeah, it's been a bit of a strange year for Siegel, I think. He's shown promise at times, particularly in qualifying. I think Barber was the one who qualified for the Fast Six in front of both his teammates, but execution seems to be a bit of a problem still. He's only got one top 12 finish across the course of the season, which was in that Barber race. Ovals still seem to be a bit of a weak point for him. So that's something which definitely still needs work. I mean, he was quite far off the pace, and he obviously had quite an instant with McLaughlin quite early on in the race where he quite aggressively pushed McLaughlin onto the white line on the back stretch, which is just a bit unnecessary. And the second race in a row, he's actually got a bit of a tangle with the leader, and obviously held up Herta quite a bit at Detroit last week. So,
well, the difference here is that I think he was either already a lap down or going a lap down.
Yeah, he was going a lap down, but I mean, obviously the comparison was still last week. He got into a kerfuffle with the leader when it wasn't his race. So got a penalty for that. He got a drive through for his crimes there. So Just they obviously need to tone it down a little bit. I think the broadcast were particularly thrilled with what Siegel did. So
It was a stupid move, I thought.
I don't. Yeah, the way I always put these is what benefit does he get out of that? I don't think McLaughlin wasn't even the lead car. I don't think at that point, so it really wasn't beneficial to him. So racecraft does definitely still need work for Siegel. I think his qualifying pace is steadily improving. I mean, he did qualify fantastically. He did qualify 20th, but speaking mainly about road and street courses here, but wasn't fantastic for him. But yeah, as you said, his contract seemingly has been renewed for another year, which I think is fine. I don't have a problem with that. I still don't think he's proved that he is a driver in McLaren standards, but you need to give him a season more. And, if he hasn't made the step up to, not far off Lundgaard's level next year, that's when you look at replacing him. But giving him another season is fine. Has he proved that it was the right call to replace Porsche with him? Probably not quite yet, but again, he is still only just past his teenage years, and giving him another season is fine because he showed that promise in his junior career to warrant it at least a year in IndyCar. And look, Kirkwood's first year at Foyt was pretty awful, and here we are speaking about him this season as a three-time winner and one of the standout drivers of the series. So you need to give people time, and we'll see how that pans out.
I guess before we move off Aaron McLaren, we may as well just touch on Lundgaard because, I mean, there was that point where he looked like Pelot's closest challenger, and now he's had a few more errant results, let's say, since obviously, as I mentioned, that streak of podiums. But he's dropped now 41 points behind O'Ward. So there's been a little bit of a tail off. I think it was natural. It wasn't always going to be. I mean, the start was too good to be true last night. Obviously, as you mentioned, Danny was cost a bit in the pits by... It was a bit of a bizarre blunder, really. I mean, he looked like he basically just missed his pit box.
He looked like he got caught out by Pelot a little bit. And then he reversed in pit lane, which I think he should have got a more harsh penalty for, because that seems something you definitely shouldn't be doing. He got a drive-through in the end for it.
Yeah, so, I mean, that was just a bizarre moment, and that was that was his race, really. But, yeah, he ended up 14th, so qualified 14th, started 14th. Just more to prove on ovals for him. I mean, he had a pretty decent 500, to be fair, but obviously we've only got the sample for RLL, and they were, so off the pace when he was with them. And, I mean, they were as well this weekend, kind of at points, Graham Rahal particularly. So, yeah, we'll see with Lundgaard. Obviously, a lot of ovals coming up in late season, so that'll be something to watch for.
Let's give his namesake some credit, though. Christian Rasmussen finishing third for his first career IndyCar podium, and I think he probably had the craziest day of anybody. He started 25th, which is a very poor qualifying result for somebody who's quickly proven himself to be a handy oval racer. He was up and down the order all day. I mean, he had to restart the back of the field at lap 149 because he had to have an emergency service in a closed pit. He was on fire in one of the rounds of stops after, which meant he had to go short on the next stop, which led to that emergency service a little bit later on. And he made a ridiculous amount of passes. It was in the 50s or the 60s.
62.
62.
I don't think anyone else even got to 40.
He was up and down the order all day long. Was Christian Rasmussen, which was entertaining to watch. We said this when he sort of made his Indy 500 debut, then backed up, I think it was at Milwaukee, where he's a great driver to watch on the ovals. He's a bit like Sato, balls to the wall, give it a go big or go home sort of driver. And he's coming into a bit of a vein of form. He had a really good Indy 500. Detroit was sort of the first time, and you felt like he had the upper hand on Rossi, his teammates. And then another great result here at Gateway. And again, it felt like he probably had the upper hand on Rossi. I know not in qualifying, but particularly in the race. And yeah, really coming of age here for Rasmussen. He started the season off pretty poorly. Even I think Ed Carpenter said to us that they weren't thrilled with the results of 21 to start the season. However, really good run of races for Rasmussen, who caps it off with a first career podium.
I mean, he's only 6 points behind Rossi in the standings now, which was pretty impressive. I know, obviously, there's caveats of Rossi was on a really good run at the 500 as well before he had the multiple issues, the failure and the fire. But no, I thought the interesting thing with Rasmussen's podium is, I mean, he'd never been to this track in IndyCar. This was before he took over from Ed Carpenter last season. So it kind of continues the recent bout of Indy Next graduates on the Gateway podium, fresh Indy Next graduates. You obviously have Malukas in 22 and 23, and Lundqvist in his rookie year last year. I think Lundqvist did a race with Shank at Gateway, didn't he?
Yes.
So it wasn't his first, but you're getting these fairly fresh out of Indy Next drivers seeming to do pretty well at Gateway with Malukas, Lundqvist, and now Rasmussen as well. So yeah, as you say, I mean, qualifying was a lot worse than expected, 25th. But then, first thing I think when I look at that is, are we going to get fireworks in the race? And absolutely so. I mean, you mentioned Sato, very much like, I guess, in this current field, Daly, Ferrucci, that kind of mold. And I mean, he was literally and figuratively on fire, wasn't he? I mean, he started at the back, came through the field, was sent to the back, obviously. Then I think when he had the fire, they didn't get enough fuel in, so he had to come in under a closed pit, which...
The way I see it is his physical fire put him metaphorically on fire.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, I think even at that point, he got up into the top 5. And then he had to come into the closed pit and was dropped down. I think the rear of the lead, that was like 18th at that point. But no, just charged through again like it was nothing. It was really, like, obviously really bold, really aggressive in this really cool, super watchable style that he had. We had commented about it being a bit of an anonymous start to 2025, but he definitely feels pretty resurgent.
And we say we love Christian Rasmussen's style of over racing, so what better to find out from the man himself what he thinks of his over racing style? We asked him post-race at Gateway. Thanks, Dave. Well done today, both of you. Just for Christian, first of all, you sort of have this very distinctive, aggressive style of racing on oval. So is that something which you sort of had your entire career? And do you ever feel slightly on the edge when you are racing so aggressively all the time?
Yeah, I would say so. It's I would say calculated aggression, but I think on an oval, decisive moves definitely propel you forward. And I think that was a good showcase of that from me tonight, having to be aggressive to move forward.
Fourth place was Scott Dixon, who was having another very Dixon 2025 day of, well, actually, he's being a bit underwhelming, and then extended the fuel further than anyone else. And when the caution comes out, Shock Dixon is in prime position. And we thought it was going to be the ultimate, not stolen wins, but snatch and grab victories with a very conveniently timed caution, which cycled him to the front from absolutely nowhere all race long. And a slight delay on his final stop really let him down. Fourth place isn't too bad for Dixon because, I mean, if you told him they'd get that about lap 150, would have bitten your hand off, I'd imagine. But because it's just a bit of a weird year for Dixon where he actually lies fifth in the standings, but it hasn't felt like he's really done anything since St. Petersburg.
No, I mean, was it Power at Iowa last year who had a win exactly like this?
Yeah.
He was running even lower at that. I think he was in the 20s at that point, Power. But yeah, just a funny old year, Dixon. Like, he was in the mid-teens pretty much the whole race, didn't seem to have the pace, and kind of just felt like, well, it's not that unusual for the way this year's panned out. And obviously that's made all the more unusual by, obviously Pelot being so dominant for the same Ganassi team. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it was lucky, but it's not all luck. Like, it was intentional, but at the same time, they did it intentionally, but they were having to gamble on the fact there would be a caution. So it's calculated fortune. Maybe that's the way to put it. Connor Daly may had a very funny radio call and said, I want to understand what lifestyle he's living. But he did really well to kind of hold his own initially with not the quickest car, but obviously, as you say, lost out on that last pit sequence. But 15 points, don't really understand how, but talking of the state of the standings, there's only 3 drivers within 100 points of Pelot still. I mean, Lundgaard in 4th is 114 back. I mean, it's...
We'll do our mid-season review the week after Road America because there's a gap between that and mid-Ohio, and I think this would be our opportunity to fully break down the standings and try and work out what on earth's going on, because we try and do this every podcast episode, but we don't have the time normally.
We're just ending confusion.
That is our opportunity to break down the standings to work out what on earth is going on with these points. We'll go on to Santino Ferrucci in 5th. Do you remember how we were going on about Foyt's terrible start to the season? Santino Ferrucci's championship statement was embarrassing. It still partially is, but he comes off the back of a third top 5 in a row. David Malukas, unsurprisingly at Gateway, was strong once again. So it's 3 races in a row where they've actually been really strong in all 3 cars, because Malukas was fantastic at Detroit too. Ferrucci definitely did not have the upper hand on Malukas. He actually qualified really poorly for what we expected in 19th, but as always, Ferrucci is exciting on ovals. Had a bit of contact with Colton Herter at points during the race, and he's never went back down.
I think that's an understatement. The contact, they were pretty much glued to each other throughout turn 1 and 2. It was bonkers. I've never seen anything like it.
But for once, Ferrucci wasn't really the one we were looking at on ovals, and he actually kind of quietly ended up in 5th, dare I say it. But another really good result for Foy. As I said, 3 races on the trot where they've actually performed really well, not only on one car, but as a team.
I mean, we just had so many big movers. I mean, Rasmussen started 25th to come up to 3rd, 25th to 4th, and 18th to 3rd, or whatever he did. But Ferrucci coming up from 19th to 5th is, I mean, if Rasmussen hadn't done all of that, and we didn't have Connor Daly's fireworks as well, this would be kind of just as impressive. But yeah, it wasn't the usual Ferrucci grabbing the headlines. I think he must have just really capitalized on restarts. But obviously he said they'd contend for the championship before the season. That still looks silly. But he was also saying he expects them to regularly compete for top 5s, and 3 successive top 5s. That's proof of that. So maybe he wasn't so silly after all. I mean, should we just touch on Malukas? Obviously,
yeah, I was going to. I think let's finish up the team.
I mean, I still think he had a really good weekend. I mean, again, he was in the midst of that. I mean, starting 4th, he got in between the Penske's, and yeah, it was just looking to be a classic Malukas Gateway performance. It kind of was for a lot of it. He had an exceptional opening lap. I mean, before the first lap was done, he'd gone from 4th to 1st with some seriously decisive moves. And I mean, he kind of stretched his legs to over 5 seconds as well. He was dealing well with the traffic, and okay, maybe he was killing himself a bit, and while the couple of Penske cars behind were saving. But it was another. I mean, it's really becoming a battle, this, because okay, Malukas didn't get the results at Detroit after punting Pillow, but he qualified 2nd there. He's qualified 4th here. Again, not quite got the result. I know that was a bit of an issue last year with Meyer Shank as well. I don't think a lot of it is Malukas's fault, although last 2 weekends, obviously, hit the wall here to bring out one of the late cautions, as I mentioned earlier. It wasn't like a big hit. I mean, I'm not sure he had any damage, but I don't know. There was then that late restart where he kind of did just drop back quite a lot. So maybe he did have some damage. But yeah, I mean, he was leading the race for a portion and kind of looked like dead on for podium, really. Kind of fluctuating between him, Power, Newgarden, and McLaughlin. That quartet, they look like the 4 really that were going to be in contention, but obviously all of them had something go wrong. And yeah, the caution for Malukas was a bit more anticipatory, but I imagine he must have had damage, because even then he restarted. I mean, he had the same penalty as McLaughlin at one point for unsafe release, dropped 4 places, but he got positions back, made good headway there. And yeah, it was after the caution that he brought out, he dropped big time. I don't know whether he just got a bad restart or whether there was some underlying damage there, but he just completely disappeared after that.
Yeah, it was a bit of a shame, because he ran really well for the first 150 laps. And I feel the way he crashed was a little bit clumsy. I feel like you could kind of see it coming with the way he was trying to make that move, which was disappointing.
It was desperate.
That's something you feel like with a bit more experience is a move you wouldn't go for. But like with his first career win in sight, it's one of those moves. So
he led the most laps. He led the most laps, by the way.
67 in the end. And yeah, I mean, he didn't seem like he had any damage, but he didn't make any impact after that. So I don't know if that was just, okay, I've pushed my luck too far today. I'm going to bring it home safely and bring home some points rather than throw it in the walls there. There was actually more damage. We don't know yet. So yeah, a good weekend all round from Lucas. Once I mean, it's unsurprising because it's Gateway, and there's some tracks which some drivers are just incredible at. And I don't know what it is about Malukas at Gateway. I mean, Newgarden's like that at Gateway and Iowa for that matter. I mean, Pillow at so many tracks is like that, for example, but particularly like Laguna Seca is one he's absolutely superb at, for example, though Ward is very strong at Indianapolis and Gateway, for example. So I just find it amusing. There's just some tracks, like Hurst at Laguna Seca is another good example, where they are just incredible at one circuit. I like this. We need to do like a theme for this. What is each driver's best circuit? That might be a good series.
I mean, something I was looking at earlier. You realise Palou has won on every road course we go to.
Every road, not every street course, every road course. Yeah.
Every road course, yeah. I mean, it's not something. I don't feel like that's something that's got enough attention.
Connor Daly was 6th, and it's been similar to a lot of our drivers mentioned, it's been a difficult year for Connor Daly so far, I feel. But over was always a chance for him to go into what he's best at. And again, it looked like for a long period of time he was on for his first career victory. And Daly is always fireworks at ovals. We saw that on lap 1 where he made something like 7 positions on the first lap alone. Only driver to really run the higher side. Something we see Ward do at Iowa quite a lot on the third lap. Sort of just goes to that third, fourth lane and just pelt it around the outside of everybody, because that's where the air is and you're not getting checked up. And it always works fantastically. And Daly ended up, I think it was 4th after just a couple of laps. So he was cycling his way through the field. And he fell off a little bit, and then sort of midway through, he got into that battle with O'Ward, which was an absolute sensational battle. O'Ward was defending superbly for several laps, and Daly was racing him really well. It was maybe the best racing we saw out there, and then only ended up 6th for the end for Daly, which, again, I feel like there's so many people who want to see Connor Daly get a first career victory. But all things considered, 6th place is still pretty good. I mean, I reckon Daly might still feel leaving. He could have got more than 6th place, but a good result. Hunkos is best of the year as well.
Yeah, I mean, within 4 laps, he was up from 15th to 7th. And I think it's just a shame. This is one of the occasions where it's a real shame that you don't have TV on boards for every driver. I feel like Fox needs to really do something about that, because I know obviously it's kind of team funded and what have you at the moment. So, you know, we daily posted it on Twitter, but that was kind of the onboard the teams have for data, watching, you know, replays for feedback, what have you. But yeah, I feel like he runs a line that's higher than the high line. I mean, and he manages to carry so much speed as well. I think he has so much confidence. He really believes that he can execute. I think a lot of drivers don't seem to really just have the guts to do that. Daly really does. I mean, yeah, he was 4th. I think he was lap 24. He was up to 4th, which, I mean, on a track so short, that's incredibly quick, having started in 15th. It was just, yeah, I mean, so impressive. He was cutting it up with the very best, really. And I think Daly is in the conversation with the best oval drivers in the field, for sure. I think, I don't know, Hunkos seems to be struggling on road and street courses, but something's kind of meshed on ovals. And I think Daly's caliber on this type of track is probably a big part of that. And yeah, that battle with O'Ward was stunning. I think that was the best battle we've seen all season. Several laps side by side was so cool, and it's always cool to see Daly running up front, just because of, you know, how hard he works for these opportunities, how long he's been in the series with probably less reward than he really deserves for it. And I think ultimately it was pit cycles that ended up hosing him a bit. And, you know, 2 times in 3 races he's come close to the win. So I feel like it's not out of the equation this season for someone like Daly or, you know, your Ferrucci Malukas to get a first time winner, if we can break this Kirkwood Palou purgatory. I just really hope his career doesn't end without a win, because I feel like the grind that he puts in really warrants one.
7th place was a good friend of Venus 3K, and it feels like we didn't see anything much of Venus 3K. However, it was one of those races where if you kept it clean and avoided the carnage, you'd probably get quite a decent result. And that meant he ended up in 7th, which is his 2nd best result of the season, his 4th top 10 in 8 races, which only leaves him 15th in the standings, which I find rather confusing. But he's still ahead of Joseph Newgarden. And
compared to a Dale Coyne last season, that's pretty good going, I would say. Yeah, I mean, obviously they're kind of incomparable as tracks, but, you know, oval to oval, it's a good bounce back, obviously, from the struggles they had at Indy. But that's 50% of the races this season. He's been in the top 10, obviously. Such a big improvement on the team. You know, their best finish being 13th last season. I think his name must just continue to shoot up the list of free agents for teams who need a driver next season. I don't know how many openings there's going to be, whether there'll be more openings than in 27, and he's almost best advice to stay put in what seems to be a project moving in the right direction here at Coin. But yeah, didn't see much of him, but I think that kind of speaks to just the methodical driving, really. And, that's the sort of trait we see in your Kirkwoods and your Palous. And that's why I kind of believe VK is a fit for a top team one day.
8th place was Alex Palou in his most anonymous outing of the season. He qualified in 9th, which wasn't too bad, but yeah, we didn't really see any of him. We had a really bad opening round of stops actually, and cycled down to 20th. I think he got held up by Lundgaard's situation in the pits.
I think, because he was the car behind Lundgaard, the car that it looked like Lundgaard may have stopped because he saw him moving or whatever Lundgaard did.
Yeah, anyway, he was called out by that, but he fluctuated quite a lot throughout the order, did Palou. Ended up 8th, which I think he was pretty happy with in the end. And Gateways has never been a good track for Palou, I think. He ran well last year, didn't he? He got 4th last year, but that's his best result at Gateway. He had a 7th, 9th. He had a 20th in 2021 and a 12th and 15th in his main season. So it's never a really good track for Palou. Short overs again is something he needs to work out. I know he's got a couple of podiums, but both of them at Iowa have been quite lucky. Maybe is not the right word, but they've had their fair stroke of fortune. But Ganassi have never really had an outstanding short over package anyway. It's got to be said. So I think Palou will be content. He didn't crash out and lose an extortionate amount of points, which, between now and the end of the season, that's all he's got to do. As long as he's not just throwing away points unnecessarily, he will win the title.
I feel like, obviously, he got, just that the sight of the whole Lundgaard stopped and reversing as Rasmussen's on fire behind him. And for once, Palou seemed to run out of luck and was kind of stuck in all of that. So yeah, he dropped down to 20th at that point. And then I think it was after that final caution from Lucas's issue that I think it looked like Palou kind of just got stuck in a 4 wide. And as you say, he doesn't want to crash out. All he needs to do is kind of finish these races in a reasonable position. He'll win the title. And that's kind of what he did. I think he probably just backed out a little bit and he dropped quite a bit on that. But I think he stopped quite early for that last stop. Ended up 8th. Don't really know how, but given where he was at points of that race, not a bad result, really. And we've got 9 rounds left, 4 road courses. He's won on every road course, so he's obviously going to be fighting for the win on all of those. And he seems to have gone fairly well at Iowa as well, and you got Toronto in the mix as well. So yeah, this is, as you say, this is probably his weakest track out of the way. You've got Detroit out of the way, which is probably the biggest lottery we have as well. So
9th place was Marcus Armstrong, qualified well in 6th, but it feels like we didn't really see any of Marcus Armstrong during the race.
Best Honda qualifier.
It was, yeah. Anything else about Armstrong's race? Because I can't think of anything much. Just finished 9th.
Nope, his qualifying is all I have noted.
10th place was Robert Schwartzman, who claimed Prema's first ever top 10. Again, it was one of those, as I said, where if you avoid the chaos, you probably get a decent result. And I think that proved with Schwartzman. And ironically, we've made this whole sing and dance about how bad Prema would be on ovals. And they've actually proved to be a lot better at ovals than they have been at road and street courses so far in their IndyCar career. But Schwartzman's stocks continue to rise. I think qualified very well again, 24th. Another quite big mover in the race with Robert Schwartzman. But yeah, a nice little result for Prema. I think it makes up a little bit for Ilot's Indy 500 penalty where he was running 12th, 13th. So yeah, good result for Schwartzman, and he's opening up a little bit of a gap actually in the Rookie of the Year points pattern.
Yeah, good day for Prema. If a late caution, and we could be talking about Callum Ilott winning their first ever race because he came up 5 laps short on fuel, going for this kind of ambitious fuel save, which. Yeah, it was a real kind of excitement late in the race with him and Rosenqvist dueling. Rosenqvist passed him, but then he had to bail earlier than Ilott, actually. But yeah, no result for Ilott in the end, but a good result for Schwartzman. And I'm equally impressed at kind of how they've taken to ovals and did well at Indy, did well here. As I say, 2 very different ovals, so good stuff.
Right, we'll round up the running order. Rossi was 11th, Malukas 12th. Ericsson was 13th. We spoke about Newgarden's disastrous start to the season. Ericsson might arguably be worse. Still wasn't finished in the top 10 since St. Petersburg. Kirkwood over his teammates has now got a 90-point gap to Herta, and he's now got a 146-point gap to Ericsson. So he's got over double Ericsson's points. 14th was Lundgaard ahead of Simpson, and 15th. Rosenqvist was 16th. He had a bit of a crazy moment because he had to drive through for an unsafe release box and they didn't serve it. So then they got upgraded to stop and go. Then he had another penalty for emergency service in a closed pits, had to start at the back. And then he had that weird strategy. So he ended up 16th. It was a bit of a crazy day for Rosenqvist. And
16th and almost won, despite his 3 penalties.
Yes. It does rather feel like last year, though, where Rosenqvist started the season off excellently and is heading into a bit of a slump.
He is still 6th in points, though.
He is still 6th in points, but as we keep on alluding to, the point standings don't really mean anything this season because nobody can string about 3 good races together at the minute. We'll move on to Cole and Herta at 17. Me and Archie were discussing this pre-podcast. We don't actually know how Herta ended down in 17th. Because he was running a lot better than that most of the day. So I don't know what happened there. I don't know if Herta has said on social media how he ended up there. I don't think he has. He just said they had a fast car and didn't get a result. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Penske's having a disaster. Herta goes exactly into that camp as well because, I mean, he was contending for the title last year. Obviously came into the season with all the talk of needing a super license, needing to finish in the top 5. I mean, he's just been, again, it's that whole thing. He's been so quick. He's probably been top 5 quickest drivers. He's just week on week, the execution's just not there. And where it is with Kirkwood and his 27 crew just seems to be on fire executing and race winning pit stops. I'm not saying that's what happened with Herta this time around, but just every race something is going wrong. It's been a disaster of a season for Herta.
We'll go on to Callum Minot, was an 18th Nolan Seagull and 19th Stingray was 20th. Jacob Abel, as you said, had a disastrous qualifying, was embarrassingly off the pace. He said on Instagram that the race was a little bit better, but he said through the things outside of my control gauntlet, he had a communication error that lost him a lap for no reason after a solid first half of the race. So seeming trend here is that Abel's execution on race day is getting a little bit better and he's a bit more competitive, but obviously still a lot more work to do there. Graham Rahal was 22nd, 7 laps down, and was a bit of an inconvenience all day. I mean, he can't have been far off getting black flagged for failure to maintain competitive speed. I mean, I don't know what's going wrong, but he was just so far off the pace, which we didn't obviously get a sample really from Di Francesco's pace, but we got a sample of Foster's pace for at least 100 laps, whatever it was, and he seemed fine. So I really don't know what's up with Rahal again on short ovals. This is a concerningly recurring problem which has not had a solution in about 2 years.
It felt like a repeat of what happened at Indy, where he was accounting for the vast majority of on-track passes because he was just a moving chicane. I mean, it's harsh, and I don't know what's going wrong. I mean, he was the slowest of the team in qualifying. He was 22nd, which wasn't, it wasn't Pietro Fittipaldi slower than Louis Foster's pole time in Milwaukee last year levels, but still not brilliant, the fact that he's slower than his teammates. But the race, I mean, I've got noted around the midway point, they said on commentary, I mean, he was lapping in the 160s, which is slower than what they were doing in Indy Next qualifying. So, yeah, bonkers. I don't know what's happened there, but he was so slow.
David Di Francesco was he finished 217 laps, but he crashed right at the start, rather clumsily or by himself after about 4 laps. And then we had obviously the Penske's and Foster who had their strifes throughout the day. Right, I think time for some awards. Again, this is always going to be difficult. I think funniest moment of the weekend will be an easy one, though, if you've got the same thing in mind as me.
So I'm making a habit now of just noting down a few different ones. I will probably have the same one as you, so I'll put it
We'll
last.
save that one last, yeah.
So, I mean, first on my list, I had one that it's quite funny because it's something that always happens in NASCAR. In the post-race press conference, we had a random announcement that tech had been completed. So we've clearly got to that stage now. That's not been needed in the past, but we've not had any, unless I'm missing something, we've not had any panicky podcast. Oh my God, we have to re-record like the last 2 post-race ones we've done, which is good. I think Alexander Rossi playing solitaire in his cockpit ahead of final practice was pretty amusing. And Fox basically moving the gateway arch to various different locations around the track, including over the track. It's quite funny, but the number one has got to be the Fox cameraman being brake checked by a sprinting Devlin Di Francesco as he was running back to his repaired car after his incident in the
What
race.
was Devlin doing? He just stopped. I felt terrible. I mean, I can't laugh. I mean, I can laugh because the guy was fine. But what was even funnier is the camera falling right next to his face.
It was a brake check.
It wasn't great. I don't know what he was. He just completely stopped his run halfway through. And the fact the camera just fell next to the cameraman's face on the floor just made it utterly hilarious. We just had a close-up shot of his face once he'd fallen over.
We didn't even get to see it because we don't have the weird little. I don't understand why we don't have the little boxes where it shows a secondary thing over on the international feed. So we could just hear Townsend Bell saying "Oh, the cameraman's down. I hope he's okay." So then I had to frantically search Twitter until it finally appeared. And some moment.
Unsung hero last week was absolutely impossible. I think this week there's way too many to choose from.
I'm going to go for VK.
Oh, that is a shock. I feel the other courteous one to go for really this week is probably Robert Schwartzman.
Yeah. Oh, the other one I was thinking of as well is Ferrucci.
Yeah, I would say that's
just because for once he made loads of progress without kind of shouting to the rooftops and fireworks and bonfires and whatever.
So top 3 drivers of the weekend, I think, is quite a difficult one.
Oh, very difficult.
I think. I mean, again, I don't. Last week you had 2 clear-cut ones. I think this week you could probably have about 6 or 7 people in the conversation. Personally, this is what I'd go for. I'd go for Kirkwood third, believe it or not. I'd go for Award second, and I'd actually go Malukas first.
I actually have no idea. I feel like Kirkwood's got to be in there. I also feel like Gailey's got to be in there. I also feel like Malukas has got to be in there. I also feel like Rasmussen's got to be in there. O'Ward, it's very hard to ignore the fact that he qualified third.
And to make an argument for the Penske's too.
Yeah, this is hard. Because it depends how much you weight the race. For the sake of this one, just because Kirkwood won the race, I'm just going to disclude him. I think it's just so difficult. I just want to go for different people. So I'm going to go for Rasmussen first, Daly second, and Malukas third.
Even though this week.
Yeah, I mean, Kirkwood probably should be in there, but I just wanted to make my life easier and say he's already won the race, so I want to go for 3 different drivers.
Right, fair enough. Anyway, I think this week we don't really have anything to rant about because it was a good race, best race of the year. Hybrids done the inverse of what it's done at every single track and made the racing at Gateway so much better. I think the highline practice is something IndyCar have been pushing quite a lot, and it's actually made the racing really, really good. And it made it quite good in Indy Next. Lockie Hughes basically ran the high line with about 20 laps to go and went from 5th to 1st at about 10 laps.
That was unbelievable. That was like an all-time great Indy Next drive. That was so impressive.
So, highline sessions. Big thumbs up. Next race is Iowa, which is worrying. So, I mean, you can't get any worse than it was last year. So, and we'll move on to the predictions. So, we'll start off with the fast. No, we won't. We'll start off with the podium predictor tournament. Tom Gaymore, McLaughlin, Herta, Pelot, 0 points for him. Evan, McLaughlin, Newgarden, Herta, 0 points for him. Archie, Malukas, Newgarden, McLaughlin, 0.
My first 0 of the
season.
I think. I'm disappointed with that, by the way, because I thought Malukas was going to be a genius call, and that continued into the race, but sadly not.
Fans, Newgarden, McLaughlin, Award, 2. Morgan, Award, Newgarden, McLaughlin, 2. James, McLaughlin, Award, Power, which is very similar to myself, of McLaughlin, Award, and Newgarden, with 3. I think Penske. I mean, everybody had at least 1 Penske. The majority had 2 Penske, so that let a lot of people down. I still haven't got the results from last week, but your results, not including Detroit, are currently Archie still first with 23. I'm second with 21, and Tom's got 18. So that's your top 3 there. So, yeah, between me and you again. Making a habit of this. It's me and you for the title every year.
Let's have it.
Which is always fun. the two podcast hosts in battle for the championship. And then we'll go on to our Fast 6 predictor tournament. And it was a very enthralling one this week because for the first time ever, there was a really good chance of us going 6 for 6. This is the great thing about overqualifying, where they go one by one. So I had predicted all three Penske's, Malukas, O'Ward, and Palou. And you had gone for Kirkwood instead of O'Ward. And then obviously Kirkwood and O'Ward and Palou were the last three to run. And to that point, we had 4. So we had the Penske's and Malukas in the top 4 positions. Kirkwood was completely out of it. And then O'Ward ran well. He obviously qualified 3rd. So I was 5 for 5 at this point with Palou left to run in what could have been the first ever sweep of the Fast 6 predictor tournament. But nope, he qualified 9th. So the closest we've ever been to a sweep. You obviously got 4 in the end. Yeah. I'm annoyed. Very, very close to a sweep. And it was Armstrong in the end who qualified 6th. So I would have got that in fairness. But yeah, frustratingly close.
Very much so.
I feel if one of us gets 6, we give a massive points bonus.
I
think it might be interesting. Yeah, if we give 10, for example, if someone gets a
that's fair.
So rare.
That's fair.
It's so rare because we've done probably 30 races almost, and we haven't got one yet. So that's 60 predictions plus the ones Eddie did last year. So we're probably looking at 75 predictions. And we still haven't got one bang on. Still going. Right, talking predictions. Next week is Road America. This is where the IndyCar season really ramps up. So we have got some predictions to make about our Fast 6 next week. How many times a season have we both predicted 5 of the same 6 drivers? Probably at least 4, maybe 5, I'd imagine.
I would say so, yeah.
I think it's closer to 5. So will it change this week? Probably not. Alex Palou's on my list.
Alex Palou is on my list.
Well, there's a surprise. Colton Herta was on mine.
He's on mine as well.
Cool. Right. Felix Rosenqvist is a staple for us at the minute.
He's not on mine.
Okay, fine. You shout one out there. Then.
Pato O'Ward.
I've not gone for O'Ward this week, actually. So nice. I've gone for Rosenqvist. I've gone for double Mark Shank this week. I've gone Marcus Armstrong as well, and a bit of a left field one.
I've not gone for Marcus Armstrong.
Yes. We're only 4 this week.
So instead of Armstrong, Will Power.
I've got Will Power as well in mine, actually. So fire another one in there.
Christian Lundgaard.
No, I've gone Scott McLaughlin as my 6th.
I've gone McLaughlin as well.
Fine, so we're 4 the same as week. So Palou, McLaughlin, Power, and Herta. I've gone for the Shanks, and you've gone for O'Ward and Lundgaard. So you've gone for McLaren, I've gone for Shanks. So that works out. Interesting. Right, that is Worldwide Technology Raceway, or the Burrito 500, as it will ever be known on this podcast. Bomberito, burrito, the same thing. I will maintain that. I think we need to catch up and sleep. So we'll leave the episode there. In another great race, head straight off to Road America next week. So we'll be back next Tuesday for our race review from Elkhart Lake. But for this week, thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening. And we'll see you next time.